Welcome back to the deep dive. We're here again, digging into the sources you sent us, and today, well, we're looking at something we're calling the air fryer effect.
Right, that idea where a technology, maybe a product, just completely changes how you do things. It's so good, so disruptive, that the old way suddenly feels, well, almost primitive.
Totally. Like, once you've used it, there's just no going back. You didn't even realize what you were missing.
Exactly, that massive quality of life jump.
And today, we're applying that exact idea to solar power. It's a huge one.
It really is.
We want to look at solar not just as an environmental thing, though, obviously that's critical, but more as a case study in disruption. You know, how it messes with markets, psychology, even basic economics.
Yeah, trying to figure out the why and the how. How did this energy revolution actually happen on the ground?
Because it's such a great example, isn't it? This, like, small, elegant invention having this completely disproportionate nonlinear impact.
It's almost like alchemy, technologically speaking.
Yeah.
It fundamentally changed how we get our most vital resource, energy.
So we're going to trace that journey. How did solar go from being this super expensive thing only, like, space nerds cared about?
Right, really neat.
To being, you know, consistently cheaper than coal pretty much everywhere.
And we have to get into that paradox, too, the idea that this hyper-capitalist industrial push, driven by, let's be honest, a non-green defense strategy from China.
Yeah, that's the twist.
That was the engine that ended up democratizing power for, well, for everyone else. It's quite a story.
Okay, let's dive in. So maybe let's start where the old way of thinking about energy just completely broke down.
Yeah, for what, a century? Energy meant big power plants, big grids, centralization.
And if you were a utility company running that grid, it all came down to one basic calculation, didn't it?
Pretty much. Revenue versus cost.
Right.
Specifically, the cost of the infrastructure.
Which sounds logical, but it baked in massive inequality from the start.
Absolutely. Think about connecting rural areas, places far from the existing grid. The numbers, from the utilities perspective, they just never added up.
We have that great example from the sources Huedza in rural Zimbabwe.
Right. Imagine you're the accountant at the utility looking at Huedza. What do you see?
Okay, so I'm seeing enormous costs up front.
Astronomical. You've got to run copper wires, maybe put up transmission towers for miles and miles, maybe hundreds of miles, over tough terrain sometimes.
We're talking millions of dollars potentially.
Easily.
Okay.
Millions in capital expenditure before you get a single customer connected.
And then you look at the other side of the ledger, the revenue.
Minimal. You're talking about low-income households. They're not going to be running huge factories, maybe some lights, charging a phone. Tiny consumption.
So the calculation is brutal.
Immediate. The return on investment. Terrible. From a purely spreadsheet point of view, it makes zero economic sense to connect them.
And that cold logic wasn't just theoretical. That was the lived reality for generations in places like Huetza.
Decades of it, which meant relying on, well, yeah, medieval tech. Candles, kerosene lamps, which are dangerous, firewood for cooking, no fridge.
And that physical effort, the water, having to draw it by hand from a well every single day.
Grueling work. And the utility companies, you know, they weren't necessarily villains. They were just following standard economic rules.
But the result was bizarre. Grid power became this weird status symbol.
A sign of serious wealth. The only people out there who had it were the ones rich enough to basically pay for their own private connection. Running their own line miles long from the nearest substation, they had to front the cost the utility wouldn't.
Which brings us to that key insight, the kind people like Rory Sutherland talk about. The standard conclusion was no economic activity here, so no justification for power.
Right. No development means no power.
But the sources argue it's the complete opposite.
It's inverted. The reality was no economic activity because there was no power. No development, no health improvements, no small businesses starting up. Because the fundamental building block, energy, was missing.
You can't run a small shop with just a candle.
Exactly. Power has to come first. It's foundational.
And this is where solar comes in. It's the magic trick, the shortcut.
The alchemy, yeah. It just sidesteps that whole multi-million-dollar infrastructure problem. It bypasses the utility spreadsheet logic entirely.
You don't need their permission to improve your life.
You're essentially devolving the power system. You buy your own little independent setup, a panel, a battery, an inverter, stick it on your roof. Done.
And in Huedza, this actually happened, right? About 5-6 years ago.
Yeah, when the price finally dropped low enough that a small home system became affordable for some.
And the changes weren't trivial. This is the air fryer effect in action. It's not just saving a few bucks. What actually changed for people?
Well, huge things. They could charge cell phones. That alone is massive for communication, for mobile money, for small business. They got TVs, entertainment, yes, but also access to information, education.
But the biggest one, maybe the most profound, was the water situation.
Absolutely monumental. With just a couple of panels and a small electric pump, they could drill a borehole and get water automatically.
Let's just pause on that, because this unlocks so much human potential that's invisible on a GDP chart.
Totally. Before solar, who was fetching the water? Usually women, children.
And the sources describe it like 80 liters of water, maybe more, in a wheelbarrow or balanced on their heads, multiple trips a day.
Think about the sheer physical toll. But also, think about the time.
Yeah.
If you're spending 4, maybe 5 hours every single day just getting enough water to survive, for drinking, cooking, washing.
That's time you cannot spend on anything else, not education, not starting a business, not anything productive in the economic sense.
So, ending that daily water carry, thanks to a simple solar pump, that's a progress leap that GDP completely misses. But the value is immense, life-altering.
You swap hours of back-breaking labor for flipping a switch. That is the definition of the air fryer effect.
And The Economist focused only on the cost per mile of transmission lines. They missed all of that. They missed the value of freeing up thousands of human hours.
The solution wasn't, how do we drag the grid out here?
No, it was simpler. How do we get power here, full stop?
Yeah.
And the answer was decentralize it. Make it cheap. Let people generate it themselves.
Okay, so to see how we got from candles and huedza to decentralized power, we need to rewind a bit. Look at the history.
Yeah, because for decades, maybe the first 50 years of solar tech, it wasn't practical for everyday people. Wildly expensive, not very efficient.
That was absolutely a niche luxury. And the first big push didn't come from, like, a commercial energy company trying to make a buck.
No, it was the U.S. government. NASA, specifically. A classic case of invention driven by necessity, not by the market. Pure physics problem.
Because think about space. How do you power a satellite? Or a probe going to Mars?
Right. You can't burn fuel. There's no oxygen up there. You can't exactly send up a tanker truck for refueling every week.
So the need was absolute.
And NASA poured huge resources into developing photovoltaic cells, solar panels that could actually work up there, survive the vacuum, the temperature swings, the radiation.
But the problem they were solving was incredibly specific. How do I power my very expensive spacecraft?
And the solution they came up with reflected that specificity. It was costly.
And not just the physics challenge, right?
Yeah.
The manufacturing was intense.
Oh, yeah. You needed ultra-pure silicon, these incredibly precise, complex assembly lines, special materials to make sure they lasted. Everything had to be perfect.
And the price tag showed it. Back in the 70s, what were we talking? Like over $70 per watt?
Yeah, astronomical.
Yeah.
Makes connecting huedza seem cheap in comparison.
So for decades, it stayed in that realm. You know, crazy scientists, space agencies, astrophysicists, that was it.
The commercial world just couldn't afford it. It solved a problem almost nobody else had.
Okay, so we have the tech invented, state-sponsored, driven by necessity, but it's locked behind this massive cost barrier. This is where the story takes a huge turn.
The pivot, yeah. And the catalyst that really unlocked the air fryer effect for the rest of us was China.
We need the context here, though. China starting in the 80s.
Massive economic liberalization. Decades of just stunning growth, often double-digit growth year after year. Unprecedented in history, really.
Lifting, what, hundreds of millions, eventually over 1 billion people out of deep poverty? An economic miracle by any measure?
And it's a huge but. That kind of explosive industrial growth had a dark side.
The environmental costs.
Staggering. All those new factories, the rapidly expanding electricity grid, it was almost all powered by burning unbelievable amounts of coal and oil.
And the result, especially in the big cities?
An environmental disaster. A public health crisis, frankly. For years, Beijing, other major cities, they were infamous for this thick, choking smog. Air quality was horrific.
You couldn't ignore it. It was directly impacting people's health, the workforce that was driving the growth. It was becoming a stability issue.
Right. So the shift towards solar and renewables, according to the sources, it wasn't primarily driven by some sudden green awakening or global climate idealism.
Not initially, anyway.
No. It was a strategic, pragmatic, almost defensive decision by the central government in Beijing. They had to fix the pollution problem. It was choking their own economic success.
And they realized just slowing down the economy wasn't an option politically or strategically.
Exactly. So they made this incredibly high-leverage bet, typical of their long-term, five-year plan style thinking. The decision was, don't just buy green tech from the West.
Which would have just sent money overseas.
Right. Instead, the plan was dominate the manufacturing, become the world leader in making the key technologies of the future: solar panels, wind turbines, and crucially, batteries.
So it's industrial strategy designed to solve a domestic environmental problem, but also, let's face it, to gain a huge geopolitical edge in the next energy era.
Absolutely. A defensive move that turned into a global offensive.
Okay, so once China made that strategic call, the execution was, well, it was intense.
Intentional and incredibly aggressive. This wasn't just tinkering. This was industrial manufacturing on a scale the world had never seen before, certainly not for solar panels.
How did they do it?
Massive state subsidies. The government poured money into solar manufacturing companies. It was a coordinated national strategy, a huge industrial gamble.
Aiming for economies of scale above all else.
Exactly. Prioritize volume, drive down costs, worry less about immediate profit margins. They deliberately built way more manufacturing capacity than they even needed domestically at first. Just went into total overdrive.
And this deliberate overproduction flooding the market, that's what triggered the key event for global solar.
Yeah, the monumental crash in solar panel prices.
Yeah.
We need to grasp the scale here. We talked about $70 a watt in the NASA days.
Yeah.
Where did it end up?
I mean, it had dropped before China went all in, but their push was like an avalanche.
Totally. Today, you can get reliable, good quality panels for, what, often less than 30 cents a watt? Sometimes even lower in bulk.
That's insane. That's a price collapse of over 99%.
It's staggering. And it wasn't just market forces. It was effectively China subsidizing the entire world's transition to solar power through sheer volume and razor-thin state-backed margins.
Now, we do need to touch on the friction this caused, because the sources mention it. This wasn't universally popular in the West.
No, absolutely not. That's crucial for being balanced here. When one country subsidizes an industry that heavily, you inevitably get accusations of dumping.
Meaning selling below the cost of production to kill competitors.
Right. Manufacturers in Europe, in the U.S., they cried foul. They argued the Chinese government was giving its companies an unfair advantage, basically driving foreign competitors out of business because they couldn't match those subsidized prices.
And that led to trade disputes, tariffs.
Big time. Lots of political fights. But irrespective of who was right or wrong on the trade fairness argument, the result was undeniable.
The global price floor for solar just got obliterated.
Smashed. Which meant that economic tipping point where solar becomes cheaper than fossil fuels happened way, way faster than anyone predicted. Maybe decades faster.
Which brings us to now, the financial reality today. This is the core of why the air fryer effect is spreading like wildfire.
The economics have completely flipped. If you measure the true cost of energy over a power plant's lifetime, the levelized cost of energy, or LCOE.
Factoring in building it, running it, fuel costs.
Everything. Solar power is now reliably cheaper than building new coal plants, pretty much everywhere, and often cheaper than new natural gas plants, too.
And once the green choice is also the cheapest choice, well, behavior changes fast.
Exponentially. You see it everywhere. Look at Pakistan.
Okay.
National grid there, often expensive, super unreliable, frequent blackouts, lots of problems.
Oh, what happened?
As soon as the cost of putting a small solar system on your roof got competitive with paying your utility bill for a few years, boom, rooftop solar just exploded. They've got something like 17 gigawatts installed now.
Wow. And 17 gigawatts, just for context, that's huge.
That's enormous. That's more generating capacity than the entire conventional power grid of many decent-sized European countries. It shows people will just bypass the old system if the economics work.
And back to Zimbabwe. Even in the capital, Harare, it wasn't just about being off-grid anymore.
No, it became about simple economics and reliability for middle-class families, too. When the price of a system nearly halved in just a few years.
People started doing the math.
Exactly. Parents looked at the constant, massive power cuts, the rising utility bills, and thought, okay, option A, keep paying this unreliable company forever. Option B, make a one-time investment in solar, guarantee power for my family, and potentially stop paying that bill forever.
That framing is incredibly powerful. I can stop paying a bill forever.
It's way more motivating than any government green mandate could ever be. It's about independence, control over your costs.
Okay, so the cheap panels created the supply, the potential. But for solar to really deliver that full air fryer upgrade to become the undeniable default, it had to overcome that big nagging objection.
The Achilles heel, intermittency.
Right. What happens when the sun doesn't shine? What about nighttime? Cloudy days?
And that was a totally valid critique for a long time. Making power only during the day is useful, sure, but it doesn't solve the 247 energy needs of a modern society. You need power consistently.
So what was the final piece of the puzzle? The last bit of alchemy?
Cheap batteries, specifically cheap lithium-ion battery storage.
And again, the cost reduction here wasn't primarily driven by the solar industry itself, was it?
No, it was a parallel revolution happening mostly because of electric vehicles. The absolutely massive demand for EV batteries created the scale needed to just crush the price of storing electricity in general.
So we look to the same players again, the ones who drove down panel costs.
Often, yeah.
Yeah.
Especially the big Chinese companies. You got CATL, they're the world's biggest battery maker now. And BYD, they make cars and batteries. Their sheer scale, their vertical integration for the EV market. It just spilled over.
Making big battery banks for homes, or even for the grid itself, suddenly affordable.
Financially viable, yeah. And this changes everything about managing a power grid. The old way relied heavily on these things called peaker plants.
Okay, what are those?
Peakers are usually natural gas power plants. They're designed to fire up really, really quickly, like in minutes, just to meet those sudden surges in demand.
Like on a hot afternoon when everyone turns on the air conditioning.
Exactly. Or early mornings. But because they only run sometimes maybe a few hundred hours a year, they're actually really expensive per kilowatt hour produced. Expensive to build, expensive to keep ready.
But now, with cheap, large-scale batteries.
Yeah, the grid operator can just store the cheap solar power generated during the sunny midday hours and then release that stored energy precisely when that evening peak demand hits.
So you don't need the expensive gas peaker plant as much, or maybe at all.
Exactly. It completely undermines the economics of building and running those fossil fuel peakers. It's slowly eroding their entire business model.
So batteries don't just solve the nighttime problem for solar, they actually help manage the grid itself more efficiently.
They stabilize it locally, they smooth out the supply. It makes the whole system less reliant on that complex, centralized, expensive control structure of the past.
And for the end user, this enables true energy independence, right?
End-to-end independence, yeah. You see this most clearly in places like Australia or parts of the U.S. Southwest, where solar is abundant.
It's not just about keeping the lights on anymore.
No way. People putting up solar panels, coupling them with a home battery system like a Tesla Powerwall or something similar, and they're using that stored solar energy to power their entire home and charge their electric car overnight.
Wow, so they're basically off the grid in terms of daily energy needs.
Pretty much. They've insulated themselves from grid failures, from volatile natural gas or oil prices that affect utility rates. They control their own energy destiny.
The reliability must feel completely different.
Totally. Your daily commute energy is literally coming from your own roof, not from the global energy market. That's a huge behavioral shift.
And the biggest sign that the air fryer effect is complete, that solar has truly won, it's the planning, isn't it?
It's the default setting. For 100 years, if you needed new electricity generation capacity, the default thought was fossil fuels. Coal, natural gas, maybe big hydro.
That was just the starting point for any discussion.
Now, today. Because the economics are so compelling, when governments or utilities or private companies plan new power plants, the first thing they think of, the default option, is solar, usually paired with battery storage.
It's a complete 180-degree flip in thinking.
A total paradigm shift. Solar isn't the alternative anymore. It's the baseline, the cheapest, most logical starting point.
Okay, so let's pull this all together. We've traced this journey, NASA's niche need, China's industrial powerhouse move, the price crash, the battery revolution. What did the world actually get out of all this beyond just cheaper kilowatt hours?
Well, it depends where you look, but the value acquired is immense.
Yeah.
For the developing world, like Wetza.
Yeah.
It's the acquisition of human time and safety, getting rid of that back-breaking, time-consuming labor, especially fetching water and firewood.
Which translates directly into
Better health, more safety, especially for women and girls. And crucially, it's the acquisition of education and information access, light to study by, charged phones for connectivity, for learning, for commerce.
Sources really emphasize these are foundational building blocks. Dissolving that energy barrier unlocks development potential that was just stuck before.
Absolutely. It builds resilience from the ground up.
And for the developed world, what was the big acquisition there?
I'd say resilience and choice. Resilience against increasingly common climate-related grid outages, resilience against the price shocks you get with volatile fossil fuel markets. It's a hedge against uncertainty.
And the choice part.
The choice to just opt out, to disconnect, partially or fully, from that old centralized utility model if you want to, personal energy sovereignty.
And the combination of cheap panels and cheap batteries means the potential is now global, right?
Yeah.
Anywhere with decent sun.
The whole world is ripe for it. The U.S., Southwest, obviously, Southern Europe, Australia. And critically, the entire continent of Africa. So much sunshine, so much need for exactly this kind of devolved, affordable power.
Which loops us back to that initial problem and the failure of the old way of thinking. Those economists, those engineers, the utility bosses, they were obsessed with the grid.
Completely fixated on the transmission lines. Their whole mindset was based on the assumption that power had to be generated somewhere far away in massive plants.
So the problem in their minds was always about the difficulty and cost of moving the energy.
They totally missed the easier, non-obvious solution right in front of them. The question they kept asking was, how do we get the grid to everyone?
Billions spent trying to answer that question.
Right. But that fundamentally was the wrong question. And this is maybe the biggest lesson from the whole solar story, applicable to so many things. If you're banging your head against an insanely complex, expensive infrastructure problem for decades and not getting anywhere, maybe the problem isn't the solution. Maybe the question is wrong.
The real question wasn't about the grid.
No. The real question was just, how do we get power to everyone? And the answer wasn't centralize and transmit. It was devolve and harvest. Let people make it themselves.
The solution was decentralized, cheap, and literally beaming down from the sky the entire time.
Yeah, unlocked by a weird path involving space travel and Chinese industrial strategy.
And that, listeners, really feels like the air fryer effect in its purest form for energy. A change so complete you look back and think, how did we ever live like that? Relying on kerosene, hauling water by hand, needing miles of wire just to charge a phone.
It's an incredible democratization of a fundamental resource. From NASA's physics problem to China's strategic bet, leading to cheap, clean power basically everywhere. Hashtag tag outro.
So that's our deep dive into solar power, the history, the economics, the human impact, and how it perfectly embodies this air fryer effect.
If you want to dig into the numbers more, especially those LCOE figures showing just how cheap solar has become compared to fossil fuels, we've put links to key reports from the IEA and Lazard in the show notes. They really paint the picture of that economic tipping point.
Definitely check those out. And as we wrap up, here's something for you to chew on, the provocative thought for this week.
Okay, so solar, combined with batteries, is now the default for planning new power generation. It bypassed the old centralized grid logic.
So the question is, what other massive, foundational, high-cost infrastructure problem are we currently trying to solve the old-fashioned way?
What other essential service? Maybe it's access to clean water, maybe it's delivering quality education, maybe even local manufacturing. Are we still trying to fix by spending billions on huge centralized connection projects?
When maybe, just maybe, the real revolutionary solution is hiding in plain sight. A cheaper, decentralized technology or approach that bypasses the old logic entirely.
Something that devolves the power, the tool, the resource, and puts it directly into the hands of the people who need it. What's the next air fryer effect waiting to happen?
Food for thought. We'll be back next week with another deep dive. Thanks for joining us.